Hello and good morning. It's Mark from the Done Right Ranch. This is Diesel here, my dog. Thanksgiving Eve, Diesel was hit by a car in my driveway, which really upsets me because everybody that comes here, and it was a customer coming to pick up a vehicle that I'd finished. Everybody knows Diesel is here. He's 8 years old and he's been around cars in the shop his whole life. So, he does get kind of close at times to cars, but, he never gets too close. So I'm not real sure if this was done on purpose or exactly what. When this first happened, Diesel's eye was like a golf ball right here. It was huge and there was blood coming out of it. He's got a couple of abrasions. You can see the spot on the top of his head, and he's got a little one here. He's got a couple cuts inside his mouth. I believe they drove over his head. So I'm about to give him some eye drops here. He's on 5 different medications right now, plus 2 different eye drops, and I have to put him in at the same time, but about 5 minutes apart, so they both get their time to work. So I'm having to babysit Diesel pretty heavy right now, so because of this. So I thought instead of going out and doing some stuff this weekend like I had planned, today's Saturday, right after Thanksgiving, I'm going to stay inside and do some cooking here and watch my dog, and I thought I'd show you a dish that my grandma used to make when she was alive. She is from Lebanon, and my grandpa too. We called him Sittu for grandma and Jiddu for grandpa. I didn't know my grandpa very well because he died when I was 5, but one cool thing about him, he actually was born on January 1st, 1900, so you never had to guess how old he was. So, but anyway, let's get to this meal here that I'm going to make and show you how to do it. It's an old ethnic dish. It's called chicken and rice. And let's get an intro here and we'll get to it. Okay, here's the ingredients that it's going to take to make this. Now, obviously, you would think that because it's called chicken and rice, that it would have chicken in it. The actual recipe does not call for chicken. This recipe originally was meant as a stuffing that you would put like inside a chicken. But when my grandma made this, I've never had this as a stuffing. We've always made it as, like I guess a main course. Really, it's got ground beef in it and chicken and rice and stuff. So, but when my grandma made it, she never used ground beef. She always used lamb. From the old country, that's what they all used back then. So, and then eventually they started switching to ground beef just because it was a lot cheaper. This is not a super inexpensive meal to make. So. Anyway, the amount of chicken you put in it is really up to you. I like to use white meat and dark meat. I have way too much dark meat here, but I couldn't find a smaller pack. And then I've got a few chicken breasts that we're going to put in it. Also, we're going to use chicken broth to cook it in. We've got salt, pepper, and then ground cinnamon. I've got 4 pounds of not super lean, but kind of lean ground beef, 90-10. 4 pounds of that. 3 sticks of butter. I've got a pack of pine nuts here, which this bag was $26. So I don't know where they come from exactly. I don't think pine trees. Maybe they do. I don't know. But wherever they come from, it ain't cheap to get them, I guess. And then obviously rice. Now I am going to make a double batch here, so everything I have here is times 2. The ground beef, the butter, chicken, everything is going to be, I'm going to make a double batch because I like to give some to my sister and a couple different people. So anyway, that's the ingredients. The first thing we're going to do is get some chicken boiling and get that cooking. So that's what I'm going to do right now. Okay, we're going to get the chicken boiling. I just turned the burner up. I got some water in here. Got the thing on high, getting it hot. Now I always put a tablespoon of butter or so in here. It helps keep the chicken from foaming out of the pan while it's boiling. And then I put a little bit of, maybe a tablespoon of salt or so in there. And I'm not really sure why I put the salt in, but my mom and my grandma both did it. So I do it. So once this water gets warm here, we're going to throw the chicken in. Now that's going to have to cook for an hour, hour and a half or so. We don't want it to just be done. We want it to be done and tender. So when we get closer to that point, I'll be back, and then we'll mix up the meat and pine nuts and that kind of thing and show you how to put it all together. Okay, the water's about to boil here. Now, one thing I didn't put in on the first time here, once I put the water on and started boiling it, I took the chicken and I put it in cold water in the sink with salt in there. Again, I don't know why I do that. My Situ and my mom both did it, so I do it too. I believe the salt has a bacteria killing ability, maybe. So anyway, so we don't make a giant mess here, I'm going to pull this chicken out, put it on this plate, and then we are going to set it all in the pan there. Now, like I said, this chicken needs to boil a little bit beyond when it's done, so because what we'll have to do is take these apart and shred them all into pieces, and then we want it to be, you know, soft and not chewy and really tender. So, you know, number one, it's really good to eat that way. But then it also makes it a lot easier to shred too. So, but we don't want to cook it to the point where it's just dried up old boiled out chicken too. So there is a limit. I like to just start reaching in and grabbing the chicken as I think it's about done, and just sort of pick it up and see if the meat breaks open. If it does, then it's usually a pretty good point that it's at a point where it's nice and tender. So we're going to let this boil for a while, probably about an hour, hour and a, well, more than an hour, I'm sure, probably an hour and a half. And then once it's all boiled out, then what I'll do is shred all the chicken. You got to let it cool for a little bit or you end up burning your hands, but I'll shred all the chicken and put it in a bowl. And then at that point, now we don't have to worry about anything with the chicken anymore, and we'll start making the rest of the dish. So when it comes time to add the chicken, it's like store-bought shredded chicken. It's just ready to go. So, okay, it's been about an hour and a half here. The thighs have been done for, oh, I don't know, 20 minutes or so. Now the breasts are done. I'll show you what we're looking for here. See, if you look at this, it just basically falls apart now. That's what we want. So it's nice and tender. See the ribs falling off of that. But like I said, you can go too far, so you want to keep a little bit of an eye on it. I got a feeling I'm going to find a thigh in here once I get all of this out. So what I'll do now is I'll let this cool until I can handle it. And then I'll shred it all up, and then we'll get started on putting it all together. Okay, I have all the chicken shredded. It's sitting over there in a pan. The next step here now is we're going to start making the meat part of it. And you know this, well, I'm doing a double order. Normally it would be a stick and a half of butter or margarine, whatever, I like butter. And then pour in the pine nuts. We want to brown these up a little bit. I don't put all, well, in this case, because it's a double batch, it would be 3 sticks of butter. I'm not going to put the second and the third stick in until I've got these browned and I'm ready to start putting in meat and seasonings. Now, I've got a pretty big pan here because we're going to be putting 4 pounds of meat in here. So, we definitely want that. So anyway, want to brown these all up, and then we'll get the meat in after that. All right, this takes a little while to brown these up. I don't want to turn the heat way up and burn the hell out of the butter and stuff, so it's best to go a little bit slow. Now this dish, my grandma always called it hushway, is what it is in Lebanese. I still have some cousins that call it that and stuff, but back in the day, man, I'd go over to my grandma's house and all of my old Lebanese relatives would be there and they'd all be smoking and sitting out, and the smell of food in the kitchen, they'd be cooking, and it didn't seem to matter what time of day or night you went to my grandma's house, she was cooking. When she made a meal, I mean, she made everything from scratch. The bread, everything was made by her. And she was just extraordinary. She didn't measure anything. It was all a pinch of this and a dash of that. And just a phenomenal cook. But this recipe calls for 2/3 of a cup of these pine nuts. Doing a double recipe, so that would be 1 1/3 cups, except for I like a lot of pine nuts, so I put 2 cups in there. Okay, these are starting to brown up nicely here. So at this point here, I'm going to put some meat in. Now, hang on just a second, I'll be right back. Okay, these are starting to brown up pretty good, so it's time to start adding the meat in, because these are going to still cook a little bit more too while the meat is in. So I'm going to start dropping the meat in and breaking it up. Now you want to use, you can use extra lean. I like to use 90% meat, 10% fat, because you're not going to be able to drain this. So you don't want to use hamburger and end up with a big old grease pile here. So I don't know if you can see in the camera here, this is pretty lean. It's pretty red. You don't see much fat in it at all. But I'll be putting in, the recipe calls for 2 pounds, and I'll be putting in 4. I'm going to start out with a couple here and get them broke up. And hopefully this pan's going to hold it all. I think it will. Sometimes I got to break it into a couple pans. But just start mixing it in, and at this point I want to put another stick of butter in here. Oops, butter. So keep breaking this up and stirring it up, because we don't want, now when I made the pine nuts, that's something that you can't just throw on here and walk away and let them cook, or you're going to end up with a bunch burnt on one side, because once they start to cook, it seems like it goes pretty quick after that. So you want to keep stirring it, moving it around. Now there is a recipe for this, and I don't exactly follow it. I kind of use it as a guideline, but I season it to my liking, and when I mix it all together, I add the rice and things like that according to how it looks in the pan and how I think it's going to fill out and stuff. You know, how many pine nuts versus how much rice versus how much chicken, that kind of thing. So I've never really made it exactly by the recipe, so I'm not positive how that turns out, but just like the pine nuts, it was supposed to be 1 1/3 cups, and I like 2 cups. So you see this is starting to break down here a bit, so we're going to be putting in another pound. Okay, I have the burner on not real hot. It's about, I'm going to say just under half. Like it says 1 to 8 maybe, and I'm at like number 3. Okay, let's put the last one in. I'm going to grab the last stick of butter. We'll get this last pound broken up a little bit, and then we'll get it seasoned, and then we'll cook this until all the meat is browned. Okay, it normally calls for 1 tablespoon of salt, but we're going to need 2. And I will be putting in a little bit extra. Okay, there's the salt. Okay, the next thing we need is pepper, and it calls for 1 teaspoon. We're going to be putting in 2. Okay, got a fresh battery in the camera. Going to mix up the cinnamon, all the others while you cook this down. Like I say, any bigger clumps of meat you see, you want to try to break them up. You just want, you know, small pieces. But you can see it's cooking down quite a bit here. Okay, this is almost done. I still see a little bit of red meat here and there, and still breaking up a few clumps here and there. But it's just about mixed up pretty good. Alright, this is looking about done. I just want to check, make sure there's none that's not cooked. Okay, looking pretty done. So we're going to pull this off to the side. Leave that burner on. We're going to set this big pot on there. And the first thing we're going to do is dump in some chicken broth. Now, my grandma used to use the water that she boiled the chicken in. Her and her husband, my Sittu and Jiddu, they came from Lebanon, I think in the 1920s, and they came because they were Christian, and that wasn't very cool in Lebanon at the time. So they basically fled Lebanon, and they came here, and they were legal immigrants. My grandpa actually owned a store for a long time, and he was also a GM worker. But they came with a lot of people because, you know, that was just a problem back then. But, they also were here during the Depression. So, my grandma didn't waste anything when she cooked. Everything got, made into something, including the bones. Even when she made something that had bones, she always kept the bones and then boiled them down and made them into soup or, something like that. So she was not very wasteful at all, and that's pretty much the case if you have any elders in your family that went through the Depression. They know what it's like to live with nothing. So, and my grandma and grandpa, even though they weren't Americans, but they came here. And they were here for quite a bit by the time the Depression hit. Okay, I'm going to start out with 4 of these. I think it calls for like a quart or something like that. Which these are 32 ounces. So each one of these are a quart. It's like a quart of oil. Okay, it actually calls for 4 cups of chicken broth. And what's a cup? I think a cup's like, 8 ounces. So calls for a quart. And, it's not enough. And I'm going to put extra rice and everything in here too. So I'm going to dump in the rice right now. Okay, that was 2 cups. This is 4. Now the recipe calls for 2 cups, so we're going to be doing 4. So that was the 4 cups is pretty much what the recipe called for, but we are going to be putting a little more than that in here. Okay, and I put in 2 more cups. Get that stirred up. And then we're going to start moving this into it. It's hard to just take this pan. We're gonna try it here. I don't want to splash too much. There's all of that. We'll give that a mix up here. And then I got one more thing to dump in. The chicken. Okay, and we're going to mix that in. And this is where you find out how it looks. You know, if you need more of this or more of that. I think I still probably need a little bit more rice. What I'm looking for here is just when I move it like this, I want to see rice and meat and chicken. And it's looking pretty good right now. I think I got a pretty good ratio going. So we'll have to cook it down here and let the rice absorb all the liquid. And then when it's all done cooking here, which it's, I've been at this now for, I think, about 3 hours or so, maybe 3.5. This will cook for, I'm going to guess, around an hour. And we'll let it cool a little bit, and then it should be ready. Okay, here's the finished product. This is what it looks like. My sister and Ben are here now, so in a minute here we're going to let it kind of cool and settle in for a minute. It's been about an hour that it took to boil it down. We'll let it sit for about 10 minutes or so, and then we'll have some and see what it's like, and you guys can see what my cooking's like, and I'll taste it. See how good it is, or how bad it is. Okay, here's the true test. Ben's gonna test it out here and tell if it's any good or not.
We had to get the mild ones.
Oh, I like the mild ones anyway.
Oh.
You don't want them hot for this.
Oh, okay.
You don't want them overpowering. You just want that little tang of taste.
Okay.
How is it?
Very good.
Good?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. You ate it wrong. You're supposed to use the bread.
Oh, well.
I don't think he would know how to use it.
Probably
So,
wouldn't.
anyway, we're going to sit down and eat. Okay, Ben, show us the traditional way of eating the chicken and rice.
With the pepper on top.
There you go. All right, we're gonna eat dinner now. Okay, that was my chicken and rice, or hushway, whatever you want to call it. The hushway is the Lebanese pronunciation for it. So, you know, if you try it, I think you'll like it. It's really not that difficult to make. I hope I got all the ingredients on there and stuff right. Remembered to tell you the amounts and stuff. So anyway, I think tomorrow I'm going to be making cabbage rolls. Whether I'll film that or not, we'll just have to see. It does make it take a little bit longer by filming it. So anyway, if you see anything you like, or you try my hushway and you like it, go ahead, give me a subscription or give me a thumbs up. Anyway, I will see you on the next video. There's a few videos here and here and here that you might want to try taking a peek at from my hometown. See ya.